I have the privilege tonight of introducing our featured presenter, Mr. Benjamin Brafman. I'll go through a couple of facts with you. Mr. Brafman is the principal of Brafman and Associates, PC, located in Manhattan, which specializes in criminal law with an emphasis on white-collar criminal defense. A former assistant district attorney in the Rackets Bureau of New York County District Attorney's Office. He's been in private practice since 1980, has represented a wide range of high-profile celebrities, business leaders, lawyers, and professionals in major criminal cases throughout the country, Canada, Europe, South Africa, and Israel. Oy vey. Mr. Brafman's acquittal record in complex criminal trials is among the highest in New York City. He lectures widely throughout the United States on issues related to trial advocacy and, in particular, the art of cross-examination. He's received dozens of awards and recognitions for excellence in law and his pursuit of justice. Now, this is where the bio gets interesting, because like anyone else, I looked online, Wikipedia, various sources, and everyone's got a bio about Ben Brafman. And the bio invariably has a paragraph listing many of the high-profile individuals Mr. Brafman has represented over time. Mr. Brafman's bio doesn't have that. Mr. Brafman's bio instead has a listing of high-profile causes he's been supportive of over time. That's what a bio should have. That's what really matters. Mr. Brafman's a fierce public advocate on behalf of the State of Israel and the greater Jewish community, serving as keynote speaker, host, or master of ceremonies at more than 100 formal programs sponsored by charities, social, educational, and religious organizations. Mr. Brafman resides in Long Island with his wife, Linda. They're active in Congregation Beth Shalom of Lawrence, Kulanu Torah Academy, Israel Cancer Research Foundation, the Hebron Fund, the One Israel Fund, Torah's Aron Cheder in Jerusalem, dedicated by Mr. Brafman in memory of his late brother, Rabbi Aaron Brafman. Mr. Brafman, along with his wife, have 2 children, 16 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. That's the important part of a bio. Without further ado, Mr. Benjamin Brafman.
The defense lawyer in me could not help but mention that the beautiful young woman who Rabbi Lubin just hugged and kissed after she spoke is his daughter. Tonight is a night of many firsts. It's the first time I've ever been in Whippany, New Jersey. Until tonight, I didn't know that Whippany, New Jersey existed. It's the first time I've spoken at a CLE program where we began with the blowing of a shofar. It's a good start, and if you want to follow me where I speak, I'd be happy to have you do that every time I speak. So I want to start by telling you a story that Rabbi Lubin reminded me of because he heard me say it about 5 years ago at an event I was hosting. And it's a true story. It's an important story. I hope it'll make you laugh, but it's true. And when I'm finished, I'll tell you why it's an important story. So in my synagogue in Lawrence, my wife and I are active, and since my parents died, I dedicated the cover of the Ark, the Paroches, the Oren Kodesh, in memory of my parents. And when it came to the high holidays, our shul, like many of the synagogues that some of you frequent, has white velvet cover for the high holidays. And the rabbi said, okay, so what do you want to say on the white cover? And I said, I'd like to dedicate it in memory of the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust. And he said, that's a great idea. And they did it. And then it was delivered to the synagogue, and they called me and my wife and said, it's here, we'd like you to be the first couple to actually see it. So we go there, and it's like a formal unveiling, and they pull off the cover, and it's beautiful white velvet and gold lettering, and it reads, in memory of the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust by Linda and Ben Brafman. And I'm reading it to myself over and over again, in memory of the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust by Linda and Ben Brafman. And I'm hesitant to complain, but I say to the rabbi, that's not what I had in mind. I got children and grandchildren who pray here and will pray here long after I'm gone, I don't want them to think that we had some responsibility for this worst crime in the history of civilization. So they took it down and they sent it back to the people who do the work, and they inserted the word dedicated by Linda and Ben Brafman. So the word dedicated changed the whole import. Now it read, in memory of the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust, dedicated by Linda and Ben Brafman. One word. So my topic tonight is kind of strange. In fact, I had to ask Rabbi Lubin to explain it to me, because my topic is the ethics of cancel culture and redemption. And the thought, or the premise, or the thing we will be discussing with our panelists is, what do you do to restore someone's reputation? How do you go about earning redemption? And I want to start with the one word. We make impressions. We walk into a pizza store, and the kid behind the counter has never met me, and if I don't say thank you, if I don't say please, that's the impression that person has of me for the rest of my life. And if, like tonight, I'm wearing a kippah or a yarmulke, which identifies me as a Jew lawyer or as a Jew, that's the impression that person has, not just of me, but of the Jewish community at large. So the word please, the word thank you, it's something when I speak to high school students, when I speak to college students, when I speak to law groups, I am constantly stunned by the lack of civility that so many of us in our bar association, in our families, in our communities, in our schools, we don't stop to say thank you. We push our way to the front. We don't say excuse me. We don't say please. And as a consequence, it creates a very bad impression. So the story I've told you is funny, but the one word changed the whole meaning. So if we don't learn anything else tonight, courtesy is something which we almost have forgotten as a society. We're not going to discuss politics. It's a polarized world. You all know it. Cancel culture is easy to happen, and sometimes you don't do anything. And it happens to you, or it happens to someone we represent. And as a criminal defense lawyer, I see that all the time. I see that all the time. My brother was a rabbi, my son is a rabbi, and one of the things they teach me is that one of the fundamental principles of Judaism, give people the benefit of the doubt. Don't rush to judgment. Don't be the first or the quickest to condemn. And if someone has, and in a high-profile case, we have two enemies as far as I'm concerned, the government and the media. And scandal sells, and people love to read gossip and scandal. And as a consequence, if you make it into the press and you have a bad press day, as I call it, it's forever. And today, in the world of technology, which my grandchildren understand much better than I do, because in my generation there wasn't technology. When I first started as a criminal defense lawyer, if an article appeared and then someone moved on in their life, chances are 10, 15, 20 years down the road, no one would find it, no one would look for it, no one would know about it, no one would ask you about it, and to the extent that that person's children went on in life, no one would condemn them because of the sins of the father or a grandfather or a grandmother or a mother. It just is not the same world today, because once you are in a public venue, it's permanent. It's forever. I listen to these commercials every morning for Reputation Defender, and it's on the radio nonstop, and I don't want to get sued, so I'm assuming they know what they're doing. They don't. In my opinion, it just doesn't work, because if someone tries hard enough, or someone doesn't try at all but merely clicks the right series of buttons and Googles you, they'll find something bad if it's about you. So maybe they can push it down by inserting a lot of good stuff, and maybe they can push it down. But if someone really wants to research you, they can find something that you may have done that you're no longer proud of, or that you were never proud of. And in my business, here's what I've seen over and over again, and we can talk about it on the panel. When you get nailed publicly, it's a bad day. But when you get acquitted or exonerated a year or 2 years down the road, nobody writes about it. Unless you are a public figure, no one writes about it, and then when they do, there's always some intimation that this acquittal or this exoneration was not honestly earned, that there's got to be some subtext there as to how this person who's rich and obviously corrupt, how'd they get out of trouble? Did they have really a good lawyer? Yeah, but that's not what did it. Sometimes the government gets it wrong. Not often, and I'm here to tell you that, yeah, there is a stunning success rate, because I've learned, and I know this is being recorded, so I hope I don't lose my defense lawyer bars, but I've learned that 90% of the people are not picked out of the yellow pages for the distinction of being indicted. Just doesn't happen that way. So if you want to talk about the presumption of innocence, it doesn't exist. A judge will tell a jury that a person is presumed innocent, but with two marshals standing behind the person who is presumed to be innocent, and two correction officials in uniform and guns are standing behind the person as they are sitting in a chair where they are presumed to be innocent, you know and I know that lasts for about like a second. And then you have a presumption of guilt, and then you have an uphill climb. And today, worse than ever before in my career, and I've been a criminal defense lawyer for more than 40 years. I was a prosecutor for almost 5 years, and I worked for Bob Morgenthau, who's a legendary prosecutor, and I was one of his fair-haired guys. And I remember going to him one day on a case where I didn't think that the defendant who had been arrested was guilty. And he was an honest man. He would look at me and he would say, "Do what you think is right. Just tell me, justify it, explain it, but go ahead and do it." And then I would go into court and I would tell a judge what I'm about to do. And the first thing the judge would say is, "Are you sure? Are you sure you know what you're doing? You're a young kid. Do you have any idea what you're saying to the world by dismissing this case?" And I would look at the judge and I would say to myself, what am I missing? Why am I having such a hard time doing something which my ethical issues compel me to do? So it's a strange world, and it's a difficult world, and with most of you being, defense lawyers or lawyers, I think you better than any other group understands that we have an interesting job, and it's important obligation, and we have a very, very important ethical dilemma. You need to be honest, and you need to maintain your credibility before every court you've ever been in, because once you compromise your ethical principles, then you don't get it back. You can't go back to another judge and say, I'm not a bad person. I know I screwed up, but I'm really not a bad person, because they view you as a bad person. So I think the message, if there is any message, is you have to, be very careful. And I think you have to be very principled. And I'll tell you, personal stuff, not a war story. When I first, I'm Orthodox. I'm a modern Orthodox person. If I take off my yarmulke that I'm wearing tonight at this event, I don't think I look Jewish, but people know that I'm Orthodox. And I used to have terrible problems when I first began, because, there are 2 days of certain holidays. And I know some of the Jewish comedians make fun. You go into Rosh Hashanah, some judges say it's 1 day, some don't believe it's at all, and some say it's 2 days, and you want to observe 2 days. Well, it used to be an uphill climb when I was a kid growing up, and people would look at me and they would say, "What are you talking about? I have a son who's Jewish and he doesn't observe Rosh Hashanah." So you would have those discussions. So I decided that I really wanted to try and do this the right way. Now, there are some holidays which are coming up, and many of you will know what I'm talking about. Some of you will not. The holiday of Sukkot, which is known as Tabernacles, has 2 holy days at the beginning, and they have a number of days in the middle when you can work, you can drive, you can do what you normally do, and then there are 2 days at the end, which are not They're holy days, and you can't do that. Go try and explain that when you're trying to make a living as a trial lawyer. And some judges are more understanding than others. I'll tell you one quick story. I'm in Tallahassee, Florida. You think Florida is Miami. It's not. Tallahassee is like horse farmers, pig farmers. The courthouse has people in it with no teeth. Prospective jurors wear overalls. And in that town, I had to come there, and I was with the judge, and I'm not going to mention names, but it was a rocket docket. I mean, you come in there, you're in arraignment, then you're on trial 30 days later. And the motions can be filed because they're going to be denied anyway, and then you're on trial. So I'm before a judge I don't know, he doesn't know me, and he says, you go in the back, and Bluebell, which is his courthouse administrator, she sets my schedule. No excuses, no change, no changes, no conflicts. I go in the back, and she sets the schedule. The arraignment was in August, and she says, trial starts on September 18th. And I look at my pocket calendar, and it's Rosh Hashanah. And I say, excuse me, but, that's Rosh Hashanah. And she says, what's that? I say, it happens to be the Jewish New Year. I can't work. I can't drive. I can't come to court. And she flips over the page and says, okay, then you come a week from Wednesday. I said, that's Yom Kippur. And she says to me, what's Yom Kippur? Now, I thought everybody knew what Yom Kippur was, Jew, non-Jew, but I grew up in New York. So I say to her, that's the holiest day of the year, and we stay in temple 24 hours. We don't eat, we don't wear leather, we can't work, we can't drive. And she looks at me and she starts to look in the next month, and the holiday of Sukkot is coming up. And there are 2 days at the beginning and 2 days at the end. And she passed that year. The first days were on Saturday and Sunday, so I was okay. And she's moving down, and now it's Shmini Atzeres. Now, I don't know how to explain Shmini Atzeres, and I've gone to yeshiva for 20 years. So I said to her, look, October's no good. And she said, why? And it just came out of me. I said, I'm having open heart surgery. And it is a federal crime. It is a federal crime to lie to a government official. So I'm panicking, and she said, well, why didn't you tell me? Yeah, okay, see you in November. Now I come back in November, and the first thing the judge says to me is, how are you feeling? And I had no idea why he was asking me that. And then my client, who was like an Italian gangster from Benson, said, you told her you were going to have. I said, Your Honor, they didn't have to operate. They were able to use medication. So it all worked out, and that's my story. God punished me because, 25 years later I had an emergency bypass. But at the end of the day, I think today when I go into court, most judges who know me, basically in September, October, they start by saying, just tell me what days you can't work. Now, it's 50 years. So 50 years has taken a long time. And I practice in New York. So I think the point of this exercise is maintain your principles, whether they're personal, whether they're religious, they're ethical, whether they're, nobody explains to you what you can and cannot do. But in your heart, you know when something is wrong. I represent a lot of lawyers, and I'm stunned sometimes by the ethical lapses. And I think the worst thing that ever happened to the legal profession is that we're allowed to hold millions of dollars in escrow for clients who are going to buy an office building, and that's the deposit. And suddenly things are tight, and you're going to borrow for an hour or a week or next week, and then the deal doesn't close and the people want their money back. And there is no way out. The only way out is to repay it immediately, which is often impossible. And even then, using client funds is basically a disbarable offense. And the question arises as to whether you're going to be disbarred or suspended, and if yes, and how long, and when you reapply, what are you going to say? How do you justify it? How do you explain it? And people make it worse. They just want to lie and lie and lie. And, I had client once said to me, the thing about lying is you really have to have a great memory. Because if you tell the truth, it's basically always the same. Once you lie and you forget, and you then compound the lie, and hopelessly you just get devoured by your own lies. So I want to tell you that I've been given strict instructions. This is going to be 15 to 20 minutes, and that's it. And we're at the end, so it is on the eve of the high holidays. So I want to leave you with the words of Jenny Grossinger. Jenny Grossinger owned maybe one of the best and classiest and successful hotels in the Catskills, where thousands of people would spend the summer, and major entertainers who are today household names all got their start in this circuit of hotels. And Grossinger's was like the flagship. And Jenny Grossinger, on the end of the season, because it was the fall, the season was over, she would get up and she would say in closing, to my Jewish friends, I want to wish you all a happy new year. And to my Gentile friends, have a good fall. Thank you very much.